We're ready to talk quarterback and tight end once again. Unfortunately, we have lost Tucker Kraft for the season, but on the bright side, we got Brock Bowers back, and well, at least he's looking like an elite fantasy option again.
This is why I always say, come on, you gotta go early elite tight end. Always gotta go early elite tight end.
Yeah, wait a minute. That's not how it goes. All right, well, if you don't have Brock Bowers or an elite tight end, then you're going to have to figure out who to start in Week 10. We got you covered. Let's go through every matchup and see what's what. We do have 4 teams that are going to be off this week. It's the Bengals, Cowboys, Chiefs, and Titans. And first, we got the must starts at both positions. You have these guys just set in your lineup and forget. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, and Drake May. And at tight end, Trey McBride and Brock Bowers. Before we break down the matchups, don't forget, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. We're on the way to 100K. We appreciate every single one of you. So let's start with that Thursday matchup. We got the Raiders at the Broncos. Brock Bowers, welcome back. He made Geno Smith look like a decent NFL quarterback last week, but can he do it again on the road against the Broncos?
Nah, not going to start Geno Smith on the road against this defense, even without Pat Surtain. No, this is way too risky.
Very risky. I mean, I'll just barely put him in the super flex range just because, look, there's just not a whole lot of quarterbacks available to you if you're in a super flex league. I do think at least now he's shown that he's capable of not turning the ball over multiple times. Now on the Denver side, look, Bo Nix coming off a pretty down game. We figured because he had to face the Texans defense, but now he gets the Raiders. So how much higher you got him this week?
I'm going to say he's solid this week. He's been much better at home. He runs, and the Raiders are allowing the 7th highest pass rate over expectation this year. I think he's got to be solid. And then Evan Ingram, barely even a streamer for me here. Raiders 5th toughest against tight ends, and what's even the upside right now?
Oh, that's true. Evan Ingram has been pretty mediocre to disappointing. So I can almost ignore him, but if you need a streamer, I guess he at least gets you a floor. Look, Bo Nix, I can't get that high on. He's still been very uneven this season. Yes, better at home. Yes, not a bad matchup. But again, the upside has only come in a couple of games where he's got touchdowns in bunches. I don't know if this is that kind of game. I think he's an okay streamer. On Sunday, we will have an early game. It's in Europe, and it's going to be the Falcons taking on the Colts. So we saw the return of Michael Penix Jr. seemed to help that offense quite a bit. And then it didn't seem to help Kyle Pitts, though, almost like he was better with Kirk Cousins. But how do you feel about both these guys in this matchup?
I'm going to say Michael Penix Jr. just super flex. Really weird. Did they forget they have Bijan Robinson? Why are they throwing it so much last week? I guess maybe just because of matchup. I don't know. But this feels like a bounce back spot for the Colts, meaning probably going to be much better this week than they were last week, which is not good for the Falcons offense or Michael Penix Jr., but they are allowing the 4th highest pass rate over expectation. He does have touchdown upside, I guess, but super flex only. And I actually really like Kyle Pitts this week. I talked about it last week when I talked about Freiermuth as a sneaky start. Colts are 4th worst versus tight end. He's clearly the number 2 guy here. Mooney is just out there running wind sprints. So I think he's a good streamer this week.
Yes, look, as far as Penix, I wonder now, the rest of the season, is he ever going to get above the super flex tier? This guy doesn't have a single 300-yard passing game this year, and last week was his first 3-touchdown game. I mean, there just isn't much of a ceiling here. In this matchup, barely super flex. And as far as Pitts, I mean, look, I'll just say on the one hand, it's kind of nice as a fantasy football player to know that you have an offense that's so one-dimensional that it only gets the ball to 3 different players. It's really not working for the Falcons in real life. That offense is just not dynamic. They probably should change something, but it's not going to change anytime soon. So Kyle Pitts remains a strong streaming option because he's one of the only guys that actually touches the ball. Now, in a surprising loss, I mean, Daniel Jones looked like he barely had time to throw the ball, has his worst game of the season, 3 interceptions. Are you worried now? We're getting the old Daniel Jones back.
Now, you can't be worried after one bad game here. He's been good all year, and like I said, this feels like a bounce-back spot. Although I will say it feels like maybe one of those JT games is brewing here, but I still think Daniel Jones should be solid. And look, Tyler Warren, we don't have him as a must start anymore. That's because over the last 2 games, he hasn't been that good. And the Falcons are actually the toughest versus tight ends this year. They play the most single high. He's also 4th on the team in targets per route run versus single high. I have my worries about Tyler Warren this week, but that said, do you really have a better option than Tyler Warren? Probably not. I'm still going to say solid here, but I'm getting a little nervous.
I mean, you're right. He may not have his best week, and now it's back-to-back weeks he hasn't scored, and you realize, well, that takes away quite a bit of the ceiling because it's not like he's putting up 100-yard games. But I still feel like he's one of the best options out there at tight end. I have to put him as a strong start. He'll be involved enough. And as far as Daniel Jones, I'm not worried actually at all. I mean, first of all, it wasn't really his fault. Again, that defensive line just made that Colts O-line look ridiculous. I don't think that's going to be quite a problem this week, but also even in a bad game, Jones at least pulled out 14 fantasy points because he ran for a touchdown. He can always do this. He is still solid. Now, before we get to the rest of the Sunday slate, let me remind you that this is a great time to sign up for Underdog and get your picks in if you haven't yet, because if you sign up as a new customer and you use code ENDGAME, you get a free pick. All right, it's a gimme, and then you also get an extra $100 in bonus funds when you play $5 towards any pick. That's on top of the $1,000 worth of bonus cash that you could potentially get when you make your first deposit. The free picks, the bonus funds, all of that comes if you sign up for Underdog as a new customer. Just make sure you use code ENDGAME when you check out. Saints at Panthers this week. We're going to get another start for Tyler Shuck and probably many more. He's just going to play out the season. Do you expect anything different this week? Maybe a little bit more experience, a little bit better performance?
I mean, maybe, but this isn't a great matchup against the Panthers. Are they really going to have to throw a lot? Like, are the Panthers going to be blowing them out? Probably not. The Panthers control the clock with that running game. What's the upside here? I'm not starting Tyler Shuck in any format, but I will say, I said last week, hey, Juwan Johnson is coming on. You should probably start streaming Juwan Johnson again. He had another nice game. I still think he's a good streamer this week.
Yeah, and Johnson, not big output, but he did score a touchdown. But the previous 2 weeks, that target share was starting to go up. I think it was 15 targets in just the previous 2 games. And so he is definitely back on the streaming radar. Tyler Shuck is not yet on the radar. And what about Bryce Young and the Panthers? I mean, look, they're better at home. They get that Saints defense. Does this make him a streaming option?
Nope, not doing it here. Well, again, what is the upside? It's all the running game. It's all Rico Dowdle. I don't even know. Like, maybe the Bengals, I could consider Bryce Young. Maybe the Cowboys. I don't know. He's only even reached 200 passing yards once all year. He's only thrown for more than 1 touchdown 3 times all year. What is the upside here? Not starting Bryce Young.
Yeah, I look in a super flex league. You could throw him out there for a floor. I mean, it's the Saints defense. I think he can do something, but really, you only probably want to consider Bryce Young if you feel like they're going to get rolled and he'll have to put up some garbage time stats. That seems to be his only path to fantasy relevance.
Do you want to get advice from Pierre and myself at the tip of your fingertips? Start, sit, waiver wire, trades, and more? Well, you can do all of this and more on our new app, Draft Lane. We have the ability to view your roster, waivers, and more to give you the right feedback to make the perfect choice. Download Draft Lane from the App Store or Google Play, or use these handy QR codes. And first-time users can use code ENDGAME to get 10 free credits and get your questions answered today.
Now we got Giants taking on the Bears this week. So Jackson Dart, a lot of people really high on him. We didn't like him the last couple of weeks, and he hasn't been great, but this seems like a much better spot for him.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't been bad because he's been kind of garbage time and rushing, the rushing touchdown, right? But this is a great spot. Bears allowing the 7th most points to QBs. He's now had a rushing touchdown in 5 of 6 games, so he gives you that rushing ability as well. And the running game is not very good here. I think he's got to be solid. And then I'll say Theo Johnson, very risky streamer this week. Yes, he's got touchdown upside, but if he doesn't score, he's giving you almost nothing.
Yeah, but look, if you're streaming tight ends, what else could you ask for, honestly? I mean, I feel like Theo Johnson is kind of like the new Hunter Henry. 5 touchdowns in the last 6 games. Always a possibility, but just don't expect more than that. So as far as Jackson Dart goes, I did recommend him as one of the top streaming candidates if you can get him. Look, it's the Bears defense. You know they are still vulnerable to the pass. We saw what Joe Flacco just did to them. Jackson Dart is no Joe Flacco, but he does run the ball pretty well. All right, now I'm curious, what do you take away from Caleb Williams' performance last week? And I know we don't expect him to catch touchdowns or multiple passes and things like that again, but still, he was more effective, a ton of fantasy points. Is he taking a step forward, or was it just the Bengals defense?
Probably more just the fact that it was the Bengals defense. But look, the Giants are allowing the 5th highest pass rate over expectation and the 4th most fantasy points to QBs here. So, this is a good spot, but I don't want to overreact to last week. I'm going to say solid, but like barely solid, borderline high-end streamer. And then I know a lot of people are going to ask about Colson Loveland coming off that big game. Cole Kmet injured, banged up again here, but again, don't chase last week. That was the Bengals. Giants play the most man in the entire NFL, and he's been way, way better against zone than man this year, but you could stream him if you need to.
Yeah, as far as Caleb Williams, exactly right. I'm not going to overreact to last week. He is streamable, but I expect this to be a little bit more run-heavy attack here, partly because I don't think that they're going to need to pass the ball as much as they did last week against the Bengals. As far as Loveland, look, we all knew he would smash given the chance because the Bengals, again, just very generous to tight ends. The Giants is not a bad spot, but still, I'm going to say this. If Cole Kmet is out, remember he left last week's game, again, concussion protocol, I think you've got to be interested in Loveland. This is still not a bad matchup for him, and his involvement as a receiver had been increasing steadily even up until last week. So I might slot him into the solids here if I know Kmet missing. Now let's talk Jags at Texans. All right, so Trevor Lawrence and no tight end really to speak of in Jacksonville here. Trevor Lawrence is already without Travis Hunter. He might be without Brian Thomas Jr. How good can you feel about him against this Texans defense?
Can't feel good. Might even be without Diami Brown, who's in the concussion protocol. On the road against the Texans, like, look, could he score a goal line sneak touchdown again or two like last week? Sure. But if he doesn't, you are going to absolutely regret this. I am not starting Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, we've been fading or just outright benching quarterbacks versus Texans all year long. Shouldn't really stop doing that. Only reason I will say Trevor Lawrence in Superflex, again, Superflex, you don't have that many great options at quarterback. And only because they are now starting to run T-Law a little bit more, that at least gives him some appeal. And on Texans side, probably saw CJ Stroud out in concussion protocol for the week. Have to check back and see what his status is. So if Stroud suits up, how do you feel? And if he doesn't, it's Davis Mills.
Yeah, I'll say Stroud. Look, this is actually a good matchup. They're allowing the 6th most points to QBs and the highest pass rate over expectation. Geno Smith just had a nice game against them. But, I mean, still, how good can we really feel about CJ Stroud? Say if he clears the concussion protocol and he plays, I'll say he's a streamer. Davis Mills, yeah, it's a good matchup, but it's not a good QB here. A super flex only just because it is a good matchup. And then look, Dalton Schultz, kind of like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We don't know what we're going to get. He had a good game a few weeks ago, was terrible 2 weeks ago, was good again this week. But he is the clear number 2 with Davis Mills here, and the Jags are allowing the 2nd most points to tight end. So I think if it's Davis Mills, especially, you can stream Dalton Schultz.
Yeah, well, Dalton Schultz is not dead yet. You're right. This is a good spot for him. The aggravating thing is now they've got all their receivers back healthy, so it's going to be kind of risky. So just a streamer. I'm going to say either Texans quarterback. I think just in Superflex if you really need them and don't have a better option. Just the Texans are going to be one of these teams that typically get into low-scoring games because they have a great defense and a mediocre offense. As far as the Jaguars, they have a decent offense and a fairly good defense. This game is not going to be a shootout, so I just don't expect a lot from the passing game. Ravens at Vikings this week. Good to see Lamar Jackson back, especially if he's in your fantasy lineup, so you just start him. Now, Mark Andrews, back in the box score. 2 touchdowns out of nowhere seemingly. Does this mean that he is now on the streaming radar at least?
I think so. You look at it, the Vikings play the most too high in the entire NFL. He leads the team in targets per route run versus too high. Now, don't expect 2 touchdowns again. I think those were his only 2 catches as well. And we saw like Charlie Kohler get involved. Isaiah Likely. Like what is this? Tight end you over here? What's going on? Why are we throwing all these tight ends? But anyways, I think you can stream Mark Andrews. Likely, Kohler, no, not starting that.
Yeah, Likely has been invisible this year. A lot of people thought he would take a step forward. I don't know if it's that just lingering effects from the early season injury or what, but you can't think about him. I guess you can think about Andrews again, but it still seems touchdown or bust. All right, now let's talk Vikings. All right, JJ McCarthy. I think he showed me enough. I actually talked about him as a waiver wire pickup. Not a guy I feel great about, granted, but still, this Ravens defense is looking like a pretty good matchup.
Well, I don't know. I don't think I feel as good about this matchup as you do. Ravens defense is getting healthier, and he's still he had the 2 touchdowns, he had the rushing touchdown, but the yards just aren't there. So if he doesn't give you that rushing touchdown, those passing touchdowns, what are we really getting here? I don't expect a big day from him. I'm just gonna say super flex here, and then TJ Hawkinson. I know he scored, but that was all he did. 3 catches for 11 yards last week. Not only that, the Ravens play the 4th most man. He ranks dead last on the team in targets per out run, yards per out run, and fantasy points per out run versus man. I'm not starting Hawk this week.
On the other hand, I'm going to say, as far as a guy like Hawk, there's so many tight ends we throw at least in the flex range because you could get a touchdown out of them. You could do that for Hawkinson. But look, I think the reason why I'm a little more optimistic on McCarthy this week is because game script. I know usually you focus on the defense and the schemes and all that. And I mean, obviously that's important, but game script changes things a lot. I think they just didn't have to pass the ball that much last week. I mean, they were running ahead against the Lions, surprisingly. This week, I feel like they're going to have to against Baltimore. So I think McCarthy is at least a streamer for me. This week, the Bills taking on the Dolphins again, this time in Miami. Josh Allen is a no-brainer. Dalton Kincaid, well, I'd like to just say this was the week I picked him to boom, not the previous week. It doesn't work out that way. So, given the inconsistency here, how do you feel about Dalton Kincaid in week 10?
I feel great about Dalton Kincaid this week. Dolphins run the 4th most too high in the entire NFL. He leads the team in targets per out run, yards per out run, and fantasy points per out run versus too high. In fact, he leads all qualified tight ends in yards per out run and fantasy points per out run versus too high. And he's second behind only Sam Laporta in targets per out run. I think Dalton Kincaid, as long as he's fully healthy, which he was last week finally, he's a strong start this week.
Yeah, this could be a smash spot, and that's the thing with Kincaid. He is very effective when used, but here's the thing. Those route run rates, they're inconsistent for him because he's not always on the field a lot of the times like some tight ends. He still shares snaps with a couple other guys. Are they really going to need to be passing a ton in the second half in this game? He's still high-end solid for me. I'm just not going to assume he's going to smash. And you know what? I'm going to just assume that Tua Tagovailoa does not smash. In fact, I already know how this is going to go. Yes, I'm a jilted Dolphins fan. He does not do well against Buffalo. I'm not starting him.
Nah, how can you? You cannot start him.
Let's talk Browns versus Jets. All right, so the Browns still got Dylan Gabriel, and it looks like he may have both his tight ends back if David Njoku plays, and Harold Fannin also comes back. Remember, they're coming off of their bye. So, what's what this week?
Well, Dylan Gabriel, I'm going to say barely super flex, only because I feel like there are worse options, although I don't know if there are that many worse options, but if you have to, you can here in super flex. This is not a good matchup against the Jets, so, and then I'm just going to say Fannin and Njoku, both streamers this week. Nothing jumps out to me like this is a great matchup other than Dylan Gabriel loves him some tight end. That did not sound right.
No, but I don't think it's going to look right for me to have these guys in my lineup. Again, both guys have been banged up. Fannin and Njoku taking turns being hurt, being the guy. I don't want to deal with this. Honestly, there's not a massive upside here for either guy. I'm just going to sit and look elsewhere. And like you said, Dylan Gabriel, barely super flex. Now, when we last saw Justin Fields before the bye, looked like an NFL quarterback again, put up a big game, but again, it was the Bengals. So Against this Browns, very legit defense, what do you expect for Fields and rookie tight end Mason Taylor?
Well, you can't feel good. I will say the Browns are much better against the run than the pass, but this is a game where you could get sacked like 7, 8, 9, 10 times like we saw the week prior to that Bengals game. So I'm just going to say a risky streamer because he does run and it's not a horrible matchup. And it sounds like Garrett Wilson is going to play. Mason Taylor, a streamer, but not one of my favorite streamers here. The Browns play the sixth most man, and he has not been very good against man this year.
Yeah, I'm just going to sit Mason Taylor and say Justin Fields, only super flex. The thing is, like if you rewind to that last game where the Jets put up a ton of points, a lot of it was Breece Hall in the running game, right? That opens things up for Justin Fields and the pass game. If Breece Hall isn't able to get much going against Cleveland and that shutdown run defense, it doesn't make me feel good about Fields. He's not one of these passers who can take advantage, these deep shots. Like, who is he throwing to? Hopefully he gets Garrett Wilson back, but even so, yeah, I'm very worried here. I think he's a very risky option. Patriots taking on the Bucs. That means we're going to have May versus Mayfield. Let's see what we think. Oh, Drake May, you just start him at this point, right? We got him as a must start. Can't say the same for his tight end Hunter Henry, though.
No, and I can't say I love this matchup here either, but at least he does something and he could score. So unlike guys like TJ Hawkinson or, I feel like, or Isaiah Likely, who has to score to do anything, at least he gives you a little something so you could stream him, but I don't love it.
Hunter Henry is just one of these guys we should just always leave as a maybe streamer, and that's it. All right, let's talk Baker Mayfield. So coming off the bye, hopefully he's good to go. His receivers, the ones who are still available to him, are good to go. What do you think he does against this Patriots defense, which has looked pretty solid lately?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think this does have sneaky shootout potential. Both good run defenses, both good offenses. I think this game could turn into a sneaky shootout, but this is a tough Patriots defense, and Baker Mayfield did not look good the last two games before the bye. But I still think I got to call Baker Mayfield solid, and then I'll say Cade Otton. I think he's a good streaming option. He's, at least gives you something, again, like Hunter Henry, but probably gives you more than Hunter Henry, and he could score.
Yeah, well, with Otton, this is the thing, is we know Evans isn't walking through that locker room anytime soon. Godwin probably not going to play. They still will need Otton to have a role, some targets here. So he's streamable. And as far as Baker Mayfield, well, this could be a sneaky shootout. You're right. But it's not a smash spot. He's still missing, I think, too many weapons to say he's strong like we had been early in the season, but he should be solid. Cardinals at Seahawks this week. You got Trey McBride, no question you start him. There might be a question as to who is the starting quarterback for the Cardinals now, because even though Kyler Murray was supposedly going to come back last week, he didn't play, and Jacoby Brissett shockingly led them to a win over the Cowboys on the road. Do we have a legit quarterback controversy in Arizona?
I mean, I guess, but I don't even know if there's a controversy. I feel like you almost have to just go with Jacoby Brissett, right? But either way, I can't feel good here. This is a tough matchup on the road against the Seahawks. Whoever starts for the Cardinals, I'm just going to say super flex.
Yeah, that Seattle defense has been good, and they are definitely good at home. Tough for either guy. Kyler Murray, I just need to sit him for now until I'm sure that they're even sure he's their guy. Jacoby Brissett, I think I can slide in as a super flex option just because he's looked decent. Then last week, look, Sam Darnold looked all world. I mean, I don't know if we'll see a performance like that again, but you can't feel too bad. He's at home against this Cardinals defense, although they did pretty effectively limit Dak Prescott and that Cowboys offense.
Yeah, don't get too excited here. This is not the defense he faced last week, but still, this is not an elite defense. I'm not worried, and Sam Darnold has been really, really good this year. I think he's got to be a solid start.
Yeah, I really liked Darnold as a streamer last week. Hopefully you rolled with him. Not the same matchup like you said, but exactly. I mean, this guy is going to be solid pretty much every week. Now let's talk Rams at 49ers. So Matthew Stafford, another guy who just continues to roll. One of these veteran QBs you feel like you can just depend on a weekly basis. Is that the case this week?
Why not? He's playing great. It's a 49ers, but man, this defense is so banged up. They just lost Mikael Williams for this season. Unbelievable what's going on here. I don't even care that it's not the best matchup. He's been too good. He's got to be solid.
I think they're going to find out that pairing Devontae Adams with Puka Nacua was a good decision. This McVay offense is just going to continue to roll. And Stafford, for what it's worth, back injury? What back injury? But speaking of injuries, got San Francisco here. It seems like it's going to be Mac Jones. Who knows for how long? They're saying Brock Purdy, that injury is probably not even going to go away completely this season. Who knows if he's even coming back? But look, let's assume it's going to be Mac Jones again. This time he gets that Rams defense. And then is Mac Jones just not good for George Kittle or what?
He might not be. I'll say George Kittle, I don't know what's going on here, but he has been better versus zone this year, and the Rams do play zone 77% of the times. But how good can we feel with Mac Jones here? But then at the same time, how many tight ends do you feel better about than George Kittle? I'm still going to say solid. Mac Jones, I'm just going to say barely super flex here. Rams, third lowest pass rate over expectation, fifth fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. Not a good matchup for Mac Jones this week.
No, Mac Jones has been less effective as the weeks have gone on. Like you said, not a great spot for him. He doesn't have rushing upside. Super flex only. And then as far as George Kittle, I think we got to drop him down. You can't just say automatic start. Now, again, how many tight ends do you really want to put over George Kittle? But he just hasn't been getting that elite target share with Mac Jones. So just solid. Next up, let's talk Lions at Commanders. All right, so now we're going to get Road Goff, but gets to face that Commies defense that didn't do a whole lot of defending last week against Seattle, and then Sam Laporta as well.
Yeah, you got to feel good about Goff this week after what Sam Darnold just did to them. I know there's always a risk that, they run in 4 touchdowns and he doesn't throw for a bunch of touchdowns, but he's always so solid. I'm going to say a strong start this week in this matchup, and Sam Laporta also has to be a strong start. He's got 16 or more points in 3 of the last 4 games. You really going to bench him against the Commanders? No, you're not.
Well, again, looking from a game script point of view here, first of all, Road Goff, not quite the same as home Goff, still to some extent. Are they really going to need to pass a lot? The Lions are one of the more run-heavy teams because they can, and they probably can afford to this week. So I think Goff, more of a floor play. I'm just going to say solid this week. Laporta, though, as far as tight ends go, should be strong. He's been involved. This kind of matchup does favor him. And sadly, Commanders without Jaden Daniels for a while. I'm sure y'all saw that gruesome injury. So back to Marcus Mariota. I'm going to assume he's just kind of like a barely super flex start.
Yeah, I think he's like a okay super flex start. I would start him over a guy like Dylan Gabriel, that's for sure. Lions 9th most pass rate over expectations and 11th most points QB, so this isn't a terrible spot here. And he does run a little bit, so I think he's fine for super flex. And then, look, Zach Ertz, I'm going to say a risky streamer. The Lions play the 3rd most man and the 7th most single high. He struggles against those shells, but I talked about it on the wide receiver video. Him and Debo are like the last men standing here, so I guess he's got to get some targets, but risky.
Yeah, you figure that if anything, Ertz should be more involved, but just don't love this spot for him. You can't love this offense or really much about Washington these days. It's crazy to think what's happened. But look, in a better situation, he might be higher than a streamer, but this week, that's all he is. And Sunday night, we're going to have the Steelers taking on the Chargers in LA. All right, so let's start with Aaron Rodgers and his tight ends. Do you feel like they can do something significant in this game? I know the Steelers pulled off that shocking win last week, but it really wasn't due to the passing game.
Yeah, I don't know if significant is the right word here. I'm going to say Aaron Rodgers just super flex, and I don't even love him here. This is a tough spot on the road, and he's only gone over 18 fantasy points twice all year, so super flex, but don't love it. I'm not starting Jonnu Smith. That doesn't seem like he's the guy here, but I will say I do like Freiermuth again a little bit this week. Risky streamer here, but the Chargers, yes, they've been tough against tight ends, but he is 2nd on the team in yards per out run and fantasy points per out run versus zone, and the Chargers play the 5th most zone, but it's risky.
Well, since they remember that Pat Freiermuth is on the team a couple weeks ago, he's actually been a little bit more involved, but just so unpredictable. I don't want to depend on it. Risk that 0. I don't want to start either Steelers tight end just yet. And then Aaron Rodgers, barely super flex. This is a guy who every once in a while will put out a big game when he's motivated. This is not one of those weeks. He averages 211 passing yards per game, but also his season high is still 249. That's not upside. Justin Herbert, Oronde Gadsden, that's upside. But how much this week? And I guess the question is, are you buying into last week's Steelers defense just being this way going forward?
I'm not buying into that. That just felt like a perfect storm of everything. Let's see him do it for 2 weeks in a row. I will say my one little concern here for Justin Herbert is Joe Alt. Certainly going to miss this week, maybe a significant part of the season, re-injuring that ankle. But against this defense, you got to take a chance on Justin Herbert. He's got to be a strong start. And look, Gadsden didn't go off last week, but he still had 5 catches for 68 yards, and the Steelers third worst versus tight ends. You got to take a chance here again. He's solid.
I will say this, as far as that Steelers pass rush, this is kind of what we expected all season. I mean, they do have TJ Watt. They're supposed to be one of these better defenses against the quarterback. So, I mean, it was shocking they did it against the Colts in an offensive line, but maybe the Steelers have figured something out at least. And with that Chargers offensive line getting worse, this may not be a great game for Justin Herbert. I think he's very solid, but I don't think he's going to go off. And Oronde Gadsden, the second, again, he's got to be at least solid. He continues to get those shots downfield. I mean, the bevy of options they have at wide receiver is just going to leave him open, and Justin Herbert is still looking his way. Now, Week 10 will conclude with the Eagles taking on the Packers in Lambeau. So Jalen Hurts is still a must start. Dallas Goedert at tight end still seems like a good option.
Yeah, especially this week because you look at it, the Packers have been kind of sneaky bad against tight end position, but also they play a ton of zone. Talked about on the wide receiver video, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, they're better against zone. AJB, better against man. I think this is a good Goedert week. I think he's solid.
Yep, he's still going to be involved. He's been doing this most of the season. It just looks like with this new OC, Goedert is going to continue to be relevant, so definitely solid even against a good Packers defense. Now, as far as the Packers offense, Jordan Love didn't exactly have his best game last season. Probably the low light of the season is that one interception he threw. Don't know what he was thinking. Can he get better? But also now, again, RIP Tucker Kraft's fantasy season, just when he was dominating, it's over. Can Luke Musgrave do something to fill those shoes?
I'm not sure he can fill the shoes exactly, and this is not a great matchup here. Eagles are tough versus tight ends, but like you said, Kraft is out, Golden is hurt, Reed is hurt, Dontavian Wicks is hurt. He's got to get targets at least, right? So I think he can at least be a streamer. Probably a risky streamer, not my favorite, but you could take a chance here. And I'm just going to say Jordan Love is a streamer too. He's been pretty boom bust this year, and we know Jacobs gets the touchdowns, and against this Eagles defense that just got better by trading for Jalen Phillips, this is very tough for Jordan Love this week. Just going to say a streamer.
I'm going to bet at home that Love can bounce back. Doesn't have the high ceiling, but look, this is one of these games. They might get out of their comfort zone. The Eagles are going to probably force them to throw the ball more than they want. So I think he can be solid enough to give you that floor. And look, I've liked Luke Musgrave. You know, if it wasn't for Tucker Kraft's ascension, Musgrave might be a lot more relevant in fantasy to this point. Let's see if he does something with this opportunity. He's definitely a risky streamer. Keep that in mind, but not a bad guy to stash. All right, that's everything you need to know about the quarterback and tight end position for Week 10. You know we've already got you covered at running back, wide receiver, plus a whole lot more to help you win. It's all right here.